the storm. Into this house we're born. Into this world we're thrown. Like a dog without a bone, an actor out on loan, riders on the storm.
And the music was good and the music was loud.
What's up, cyberspace cadets? That's right, it's Monday, and you know what that means. It's time for Extra Credit with Miss Becca FERHLE. What's up? How you doing? Ah, no doubt. Yeah, tomorrow is the vote. And that was shit. I thought I had you unmuted for that. Dang it. Dang it, Irate. I almost said my real name. Whatever. It's John. I don't care.
Hi, guys.
So what were you saying about voting?
Tomorrow is the vote. So I got all my work done today so I can go stand in line forever tomorrow.
Indeed. You know, somebody, who was it that's saying that they you know, it's like that they were lodging a protest vote, and it's like, well, I'm protesting communism.
Me too.
Yeah, because I see China's hand in lots of shit, y'all. We're just gonna call it like I see it. So we've got a lot of stuff to get through. If you want to, we'll just hop in the video room as you watch the sunbursts off the solar flares and the lovely corona off this beautiful sun, and then the psychedelic background now begins with the fractals. Those are Mandelbrot's, in case you didn't know.
I did not know.
It's
space.
It's like, all right, what is wrong with you? All right, so I need to hook this up real quickie before we go anywhere. And have you acquired the target, ma'am?
Got it.
You got it? Okay.
Got it.
All right. And can you see the video?
I can.
All right. Well, without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and, all right, so we're at, I've got it as part 6. This is part 5, part 1. There, there's 2 parts to part 5. And the way that they number anyway, I'm probably wrong. But so, but yeah, this is focusing on, all right. So, last week we were looking about how, Soviet Union and Red China. It's like, dude, I am lighting this mic on fire. Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. The Soviet Union and Red China and their influence, of all around Asia, Africa, South America, Europe, some of the Eastern Bloc countries even. And so today we're going to be looking at the effect of communism influence in I guess primarily the United States and the West, in earnest there. So we keep
How
it
it
rolling.
came to us.
Yes. All right. So you got anything before we go? And in the second thing that we've got for you is pretty kind of a cool little time capsule, but it hits straight at what I think are good American values. So,
Yep.
yeah, if you're offended by a bunch of old white males, then it may not be for you. But hey, what can I say? All right. Whoa, hello. Are we?
The 2016 American presidential election was one of the most dramatic in decades. The voter turnout was a low 58%. The campaign trail was full of twists and turns that persisted even after the election. The winner, Republican candidate Donald Trump, found himself besieged by negative media coverage and protests in cities around the nation. The demonstrators held signs emblazoned with slogans such as, quote, "Not my president," declaring Trump to be racist, sexist, xenophobic, or a Nazi. There were demands for a recount and threats of impeachment. Investigative journalism has revealed that many of these protests were instigated by certain interest groups. As shown in America Under Siege, Civil War 2017, a documentary directed by Florida-based researcher Trevor Loudon, a significant portion of the demonstrators were, quote, "professional revolutionaries," with ties to communist regimes and other authoritarian states, such as North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, or Cuba. Loudon's work also highlighted the role of 2 prominent American socialist organizations, the Stalinist Workers' World Party and the Maoist Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Having researched the communist movement since the 1980s, Loudon determined that left-wing organizations have made the United States their primary target for infiltration and subversion. The fields of American politics, education, media, and business have increasingly shifted to the left under the influence of well-placed individuals. Even as people around the globe cheered the triumph of the free world after the Cold War, communism was stealthily taking over public institutions of Western society in preparation for the final struggle. America is the light of the free world and carries out the God-given mission of policing the globe. It was the involvement of the United States that determined the outcomes of the world wars. During the Cold War, facing the menace of nuclear holocaust, America successfully contained the Soviet bloc until disintegration of the Soviet and Eastern European communist regimes. The founding fathers of America applied their knowledge of Western religious and philosophical traditions to write the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. These documents recognize as self-evident the rights bestowed upon man by God, starting with the freedoms of belief and speech, and established separation of powers to guarantee the republican system of government. While the United States fought a civil war, that war was for the purpose of fully realizing America's founding principles by ending the institution of slavery. Over 200 years, those principles have done an unparalleled job of promoting domestic tranquility and securing the general welfare promised in the preamble to the Constitution. The freedom of the Western Hemisphere runs directly counter to the goal of communism, which is to enslave and destroy humanity. Masking itself with the beautiful vision of a collective egalitarian society, communism directed its envoys in human society to carry out its schemes across the entire world. While communism manifests itself in Eastern countries, such as the Soviet Union or China, as totalitarian governments, mass killing, and the destruction of traditional culture, it has been silently and steadily gaining control over the West using subversion and disinformation. It is eroding the economy, political processes, social structures, and moral fabric of humanity to bring about its degeneration and destruction. Since the Communist Party does not have leadership over Western countries, Communist supporters, wittingly or not, disguise themselves by infiltrating all sorts of organizations and institutions. There are at least 4 major forces driving communist subversion in the West. The first agent of subversion was the Soviet Union, which founded the Communist Third International, also known as the Comintern, to spread revolution worldwide. The second means of subversion was effected by local communist parties, which worked with the Soviet Communist Party and the Comintern. Third, economic crisis and social upheaval have encouraged many Western governments to adopt socialist policies in the last few decades, resulting in a steady shift to the left. The fourth force of subversion comes from those who sympathize with and support the Communist Party and socialism. These fellow travelers serve communism as a fifth column of useful idiots within Western society, helping to destroy its culture, sow moral degeneracy, and undermine legitimate government. 1. Communism via violence and nonviolence. In the popular imagination, the Communist Party is synonymous with violence, and with good reason. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels said, quote, "The Communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions." The fact that the communist regimes of Russia and China took power through violent revolution and used violence as a tool of repression drew attention away from communism's less visible forms. The branch of Marxism that advocates violent revolution is represented by Leninism, which adapted the theory in 2 significant respects. According to Marx, communist revolution would begin in advanced capitalist countries, but Lenin believed that socialism could be built in Russia, which was comparatively backward in its economic development. Lenin's second and more important contribution to Marxism was his doctrine of party building. Party building basically consisted of adopting the techniques of coercion, deception, and violence found in criminal organizations, and animating them with Marxist socio-economic theory. According to Lenin, the working class is incapable of developing class consciousness or demanding revolution on its own, and it must be rallied to action by external action. The agents of revolution would be organized in a highly disciplined proletarian vanguard, the Communist Party. The British Fabian Society, founded in 1884, a year after Marx's death, took a different path in the struggle to impose socialism. The Fabian logo depicts a wolf in sheep's clothing, and its name is a reference to Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, the Roman general and dictator famous for his delaying tactics. In the Fabian Review, the first pamphlet produced by the group, a note on the cover reads, quote, "For the right moment you must wait, as Fabius did most patiently when warring against Hannibal, though many censored his delays. But when the time comes, you must strike hard as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless." To gradually bring about socialism, the Fabian Society invented the policy of, quote, "permeation," to take advantage of available openings in politics, business, and civil society. The Fabian Society does not restrict the activities of its members, but encourages them to advance socialist aims by joining suitable organizations and ingratiating themselves with important figures such as cabinet members, senior administrative officials, industrialists, university deans, or church leaders. Sidney Webb, chairman of the Fabian Society, wrote, "As a society, we welcomed the adhesion of men and women of every religious denomination or of none, strongly insisting that socialism was not secularism, and the very object and purpose of all sensible collective action was the development of the individual soul, or conscience, or character. Nor did we confine our propaganda to the slowly emerging Labor Party, or to those who were prepared to call themselves socialists, or to the manual workers, or to any particular class. We put our proposals, one by one, as persuasively as possible, before all who would listen to them. Conservatives, whenever we could gain access to them, the churches and chapels of all denominations, the various universities, and liberals and radicals, together with the other socialist societies at all times. This we called permeation, and it was an important discovery. Many members of the Fabian Society were young intellectuals. They made speeches and published books, magazines, and pamphlets across society. In the 20th century, the Fabian Society moved to the political scene. Webb became the Fabian representative in the newly formed Labor Representation Committee of the Labor Party. In the Labor Party, Webb drafted its party constitution and party program. Taking a lead role in forming policy, Webb endeavored to make Fabian socialism the guiding ideology of the party. The Fabian Society later acquired influence in the United States.
Yeah, like they were like a bunch of art fags, I guess.
I guess so.
Yeah. The soy is permeant throughout. God.
Is it-
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Snobby rich people, man. That's what gets me.
Oh, you watched the Portland protest. These kids that are doing this, the way that they talk, it's like you just know that they're not street smart, but they pretend that they are.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird to me.
I don't know, like, I fucked a black guy, so
And like, oh my gosh, it's over there. I have to have a donut with sprinkles. That's what she. A streamer that always has to talk about donuts. She will stop doing to go into a donut shop. And so, all right, so you're not used to going without. And there's a lot of articles that have come out on some of these streamers that they come from rich families. They have multiple homes. They have summer homes. They have all these plans to take over cities and take over the richer part of the cities because they can't be bothered with the gutter side of the world.
right. It's dirty.
It's dirty,
It's dirty.
even though they're
It's,
invited to them.
oh my God, I just have to take a shower looking at this stuff. It's horrible.
I was up all night filming. I need a nap.
Exactly. All right, we're gonna move it on. So yeah, talking about the Fabian Society. Oh Lord, sorry. The Fabian Society, which is a proto-socialist group that's where it grew up on this side of the globe.
Where multiple groups exist in the liberal arts faculties across many universities. Whether Lenin's violent communism or the Fabian Society's nonviolent communism, both are manipulated by communism's evil specter and have the same ultimate aim. Lenin's violent communism does not reject nonviolent means. In his book, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, Lenin criticized the communist parties of Western Europe that refused to cooperate with what he called the, quote, reactionary labor unions, or to join the, quote, capitalist national parliament. Lenin wrote in his book, "For a communist, with a correct understanding of his own ends, the art of politics lies in correctly calculating the conditions and the moment when the proletarian vanguard can take over power successfully. He must decide when, after this assumption of power, that vanguard will be able to obtain adequate support from sufficiently inclusive strata of the working class and non-proletarian laboring masses, and when it will be able to maintain, consolidate, and extend its supremacy, educating, training, and attracting ever-widening circles of the laboring masses. Lenin stressed again and again that the communists must hide their real intentions. To seize power, no...
Well, you know, in the strata of labor, what does that look like nowadays? You know, we're not a completely industrial society here in the United States. So how the fuck does that work?
Who knows?
You know what I'm saying? I don't know. That just that when he said that, I'm like thinking, well, hold on, things are completely different now.
Yeah.
You know, they're becoming an information-based society.
promise, or compromise can be ruled out. In other words, to achieve their goals, they can be shamelessly immoral. On the road to power, both Russia's Bolshevik Party and the CCP utilized violence and deception to the utmost. The brutality of the Soviet and Chinese communist regimes has drawn attention away from the nonviolent communism found in the West. George Bernard Shaw, an Irish playwright and representative of the Fabian Society, once wrote, quote, "I also made it quite clear that socialism means equality of income or nothing, and that under socialism you would not be allowed to be poor. You would be forcibly fed, clothed, lodged, taught, and employed whether you like it or not. If it were discovered that you had not character enough to be worth all this trouble, you might possibly be executed in a kindly manner." The Fabian Society specialized in disguise. It chose
Nothing half-cocked about that.
Shaw,
Executed.
a literary man, to cover up the
You know, it's just, well, we just nonchalantly execute him because, you know, you're not pulling your weight, fucker. Just the whole like, you know, nonchalant attitude is just amazing. Lord.
two aims of nonviolent socialism with beautiful words, but the brutality lies below the surface. Western communist parties and their various front organizations incite young people to create an atmosphere of chaos. They take part in assault, vandalism, robbery, arson, bombings, and assassination to harass and intimidate their enemies. Two, war of espionage and disinformation. Communism holds the nation to be an oppressive construction of class society, and it aims to abolish nationality. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels proclaim that, quote, "working men have no country." The manifesto ends on the note, quote, "workers of all countries unite." Under Lenin's leadership, the Bolsheviks founded the first socialist country in Russia and immediately established the Communist International, also known as the Comintern, to instigate and spread socialist revolution around the globe. The goal of the Soviet Union and the Comintern was to overthrow the legitimate regimes of every nation on Earth and establish a socialist world dictatorship of the proletariat. In 1921, the Comintern's Far East branch set up the CCP, which would take over China in 1949. Apart from the CCP, communist parties around the world sought guidance from the Comintern and accepted its funds and training. With the resources of a vast empire at its disposal, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, CPSU, recruited activists around the world and trained them to carry out subversive operations in their own countries. Founded in 1919, the Communist Party USA, CPUSA, was one such organization that followed the Comintern and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Though the Communist Party USA itself never became a major political force, its influence on the United States was nevertheless significant. The Communist Party USA colluded with activists and activist organizations to infiltrate workers and student movements, the church, and the government. Dr. Fred Schwartz, a pioneer of American anti-communist thought, said in 1961, quote, "Any attempt to judge the influence of communists by their numbers is like trying to determine the validity of the hull of a boat by relating the area of the holes to the area which is sound. One hole can sink the ship. Communism is the theory of the disciplined few controlling and directing the rest. one person in a sensitive position can control and manipulate thousands of others. It is now known that Soviet operatives were active within the U.S. government during World War II. Despite this and the anti-communist efforts of Senator Joseph McCarthy, the facts were hidden from the public by leftist politicians, academics, and the left-wing media. In the 1990s, the U.S. government declassified the Venona files, decoded by American intelligence during the 1940s up to the end of World War II. These documents show that at least 300 Soviet spies were working in the U.S. government, including high-ranking officials in the Roosevelt administration who had access to top-secret information. Other agents used their positions to influence American policymaking and statecraft. Among those found to be Soviet spies were U.S. Treasury official Harry Dexter White, State Department official Alger Hiss, and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, the couple who were executed by electric chair for transmitting military secrets and atomic technologies to the Soviet Union. The communications intercepted and decrypted by the Venona project are just the tip of the iceberg. The full extent of Soviet infiltration in the U.S. government remains unknown. As high-ranking American officials, some of the Soviet operatives had opportunities to influence important political decisions. Alger Hiss, the Soviet spy in the State Department, played a key role as President Franklin D. Roosevelt's advisor during the Yalta Conference at the end of World War II. He helped determine post-war territorial arrangements, draft the United Nations Charter, decide prisoner exchanges, and the like. Harry Dexter White, a trusted aide to Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau Jr., helped create the Bretton Woods International Financial Agreement and was one of the major personalities behind the establishment of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. White encouraged the Chinese Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, to enlist underground CCP member Yi Zhaoding in the Chinese Ministry of Finance. Taking up the post in 1941, Yi was the architect of disastrous currency reforms that damaged the Kuomintang's reputation and benefited the CCP's rise. Some historians argue that the influence of Soviet spies and their left-wing sympathizers in American foreign policy led the United States to end military aid to the Kuomintang during the Chinese Civil War after World War II. Mainland China was consequently lost to the CCP. Some scholars, such as M. Stanton Evans, argue that Soviet spies were most successful at influencing policy. Whittaker Chambers, a Soviet informant and Communist Party USA associate, who later defected and testified against other spies, said, quote, "The agents of an enemy power were in a position to do much more than purloin documents. They were in a position to influence the nation's foreign policy in the interest of the nation's chief enemy, and not only on exceptional occasions, but in what must have been the staggering sum of day-to-day decisions." Yuri Bezmenov, a KGB agent who defected to the West, discussed Soviet methods of subversion in his writings and interviews. According to Bezmenov, the James Bond-style spies of popular culture who blow up bridges or sneak around stealing secret documents couldn't be further from the reality of espionage. Only 10 to 15% of the KGB's personnel and resources were allocated to traditional spy operations, with the rest going to ideological subversion. Bezmenov said that subversion comes in 4 stages. The first step is to foster the cultural decadence and demoralization of the enemy country. The second is to create social chaos. And the third is to instigate a crisis that would lead to either civil war, revolution, or invasion from another country, culminating in the fourth and final stage of bringing the country under the control of the Communist Party. This is called normalization. Bezmenov, whose alias was Thomas Schumann, listed 3 fields of subversion: thought, power, and social life. Thought covers religion, education, the media, and culture. Power includes government administration, the legal system, law enforcement, the armed forces, and diplomacy. Social life encompasses families and communities, health, and relations between people of different races and social classes. As an example, Bezmenov explained how the concept of equality was manipulated to create unrest. Agents would promote the cause of egalitarianism, making people feel discontent with their political and economic circumstances. Activism and civil unrest would be accompanied by economic deadlock, further exacerbating labor and capital relations in a worsening cycle of destabilization. This would culminate in revolution or invasion by communist forces. Ion Mihai Pacepa, the highest-ranking intelligence official in communist Romania, defected to the United States in 1978. He further exposed how the former Soviet Union and communist regimes of Eastern Europe adopted strategies of psychological warfare and disinformation against Western countries. According to Pacepa, the purpose of disinformation was to alter people's frame of reference. With their ideological values manipulated, people would be unable to understand or accept the truth, even when presented with direct evidence. Bezmenov said the first stage of ideological subversion usually took 15 to 20 years. That is, the time needed for the education of a new generation. The second stage, 2 to 5 years, and the third stage, only 3 to 6 months. In a speech he gave in 1984, Bezmenov said the first stage had been accomplished to a greater extent than the Soviet authorities had originally expected. The accounts of many Soviet spies and intelligence officials and declassified documents from the Cold War suggest that infiltration tactics were the driving force behind the counterculture movement of the 1960s. In 1950, McCarthy began to expose the extent of communist infiltration across the U.S. government and society. But 4 years later, the Senate voted for his condemnation, and the government's initiative to rid itself of communist influence was brought to a halt. This is one of the main reasons for the decline of the United States. The threat of communist infiltration has not lessened since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. As an example, McCarthy has been demonized by left-wing politicians and the media for ages. Today, McCarthyism is synonymous with political persecution, an indication that the left wing has successfully established dominance in the ideological struggle. The decades of suppression and defamation divvied out to U.S. anti-communist heroes like McCarthy indicate a general trend. As one conservative American political commentator observed, anti-Americanism is a natural component of the global left-wing movement. The left wing fights tooth and nail to protect adulterers, abortionists, criminals, and communists, while supporting anarchy and opposing civilization.
Wow. Oops.
I'm seeing all of that in action right now.
Yeah, no shit. I was, it's like, and I'm not positive, but I think this was made like 2 years ago. So they were calling it spot on.
Yeah, they were.
It's and the whole Bezmenov thing. I mean, you can see. I can see historically it just play out. Generation by generation. And it's sad we're at this point, people. We are at the tipping point. We're at the jumping off place. Tomorrow we make a decision. Do we want to stay American, or do we want to become commies?
Right.
Do we want to be a part of a system like that? So, it's like I can talk about what it means to me to be an American, but I'd rather show you this because it's badass and it's got John Wayne in it, and a guy named Edward R. Murrow. So, hey Skep, how you doing, man? It's good to see you out there. All right, so without any further ado, let's do this, the challenge of ideas. We can get that going. Yeah.
The entire globe, even as it trembles in passion with the birth of new nations and shrinks in the hand of a dispassionate science, is today the site of a momentous conflict. As each side attempts to prove to the world the superiority of its position, the conflict is fought with the words of diplomats, with gestures of friendship and help to uncommitted countries, even with cultural demonstrations. It is fought indeed on every level of man's experience, for the stakes are high. As one of the adversaries in the conflict, we see a challenge as great as any in our historic past. A challenge not, we hope, to be met and joined in battle, but to be faced and fought in the hearts and hopes of men. It is the challenge of ideas.
I am Edward R. Murrow. For a little while, I would like to review with you the great conflict of our times, one which demands and must get the attention and the involvement of each one of us.
All right, so Edward R. Murrow, in case people didn't know, all right, when we transitioned from radio to TV, he became the chief anchor man that told us the news every night, right, in the 50s and early 60s. And then when he left, it was like Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley, and then it was Tom Brokaw. You like that? Hello, everyone. This is Tom Brokaw. It's almost like he's a drunk British man without a British accent.
Yeah.
But anywho,
I remember that voice well.
yes.
You heard that voice and it was time to leave.
That's right. It was just a little drunk sounding, just a little slurpy. But anyhow, yeah, I just wanted to put it in perspective, right? So this is a big deal, I guess, this video.
This conflict is the reason why most of you are in uniform, and some of you will be going overseas. Servicemen, families of servicemen, and civilians working for the Department of Defense. Because of this conflict, many of you are already abroad, more than 1 million Americans in 91 foreign countries. First and foremost, of course, Americans are overseas to help preserve the peace. By maintaining an alert readiness to meet the threat of aggression, America's armed forces, in concert with those of its allies, are serving as a deterrent to war. Some of you may wonder how directly involved in the contest you are, or will be. Perhaps your active duty is behind you, or soon will be, and with it, you may believe your involvement in the contest ends. But the truth is that involvement in this conflict is far-ranging indeed. It touches not only members of the armed forces and their families, but everyone who supports the mission of the armed forces, every defense worker, every taxpayer who foots the bill, who in fact is not involved. And the conflict itself, how can it be defined? Well, let's look at it this way. The communist bloc would like to see the entire world under communist domination. Over the years, as the strength and determination of the free world has gradually convinced communist leaders that aggressive war would be a reckless and costly gamble, they have begun to talk more and more about their ability to win from us in the arena of ideas. This, of course, is fine with us, for we are a people with a traditionally great faith in our ideas, the ideas that have moved mountains and created wealth and shaped us as free men. And we are confident that history can do no other than award us the victory in any contest in which ideas are the weapon. But I would like to say this: confidence by itself without effort does not win contests. Victory in this conflict depends on much, much more than confidence. It is a contest unlike any we have ever faced in our history as a nation. It is total competition, with an antagonist who is putting into it everything within his capability. It is not a conflict between peoples, but between basic values and systems of government, between the principles of life each believes in. When we talk of these conflicting values, we are obliged to speak of that special quality which we call, for want of a better phrase, individual liberty. And when we talk of this liberty in America, we talk with many voices, for we are a diverse nation, and there are perhaps as many concepts of what America is as there are people among us. But although we look at America through different eyes, there are many insights into the essence of our moving and growing nation that we share.
I'm John Wayne. Is there any better or equal hope in the world, Lincoln asked, than the ultimate justice of the people? We Americans believe there is not. The stonework of our national life is made of this belief. We believe in many things, but this belief that man is a responsible being bears out our own unique stamp as a nation. As a people, we are active and often noisy. We are industrious, oftentimes to the bafflement of ourselves and our friends. We relax as hard as we work. We are proud. We are sentimental. Beauty is of national concern to us. For some of us, its pursuit is a deadly serious pastime. The rest of us simply enjoy the results. Some of our national spirit shows up in the monuments we erect, the large ones and the small ones. It rings through the music which animates us.
Attaboy, Homer, swing it! Jack jump out and lead to the fourth, 4 hands down in the circle. Swing the opposite way and you keep the gal behind.
Jerry dodged that bullet and he stomped the deck. Stomped my balls till I wanted to scream. Should have killed him cause he's so darn mean. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Rock, rock, rock to broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
Yeah, the Marines got it right with the rock and roll, just saying.
Eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is traveling out the village where the graves of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightnings of his terrible swift storm. His truth is marching on.
We have, on occasion, some difference of feeling. At other times, we are united. We are all these things and many more, but above everything else, we are free. We believe in the ultimate justice which we as free men can create. Our heritage of freedom is our most priceless possession. Men before us have died to keep it alive, and men in our times have done the same. But although men have died to preserve it, and may die again, the glory of this heritage is the vision of life that it has given us. A life of dignity and nobility of spirit, such as men have never before been enriched by in the long march through the history they have recorded. There is a phrase which recurs in our national documents, the literature of our story as a people, which points to the source of our belief in individual freedom, and defines perhaps better than any other the nub of the conflict between the opposing systems of values which sweep the world today. That phrase is, "This nation under God." That phrase and others like it set the standard of our concept of man. As a creature of God, man is a being with dignity and conscience, with the ability to determine right from wrong and the obligation to act on that right. From this belief in man as a responsible being flow the beliefs in his other qualifications which we accept, usually even without bothering to think about them, as parts of that vague condition which we call the American way. His ability, indeed his right to explore the truth in all things. His ability to govern himself. And his ability to handle his own economic problems.
Quarters in the quarter.
The opposing point of view in this conflict rests on a fundamentally different vision of man. As a creature not of God, but of the state, in this system, the value of individual man diminishes sharply, and the state is all important. The state will run his life for him, his political life, his business life, his social life. What we oppose fundamentally is the aggressive nature of the communist state, its unceasing effort to expand wherever it can, to grow bigger, to take over, to supplant. This deadly impulse toward aggression we oppose as a continual threat to peace. These are the contrasting points of view between the major antagonists in the conflict which has become known over the last decade as the Cold War. For an appraisal of this continuing and protracted conflict, we can go to a reporter who has watched the growing conflict with the perception of a trained military observer.
I am Hanson Baldwin. I have here the policy statements of each of our services on the contest we're engaged in with the communists. What they boil down to is this. It's a contest for the minds and hearts of people around the world, all people. The areas in white on this map represent the part of the world composed of ourselves and those who share our beliefs. The communists seek constantly to win an advantage in the minds of the people here and to separate us. The black portion of the map is the communist-dominated part of the world controlled by the Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist regime.
Ironic, just saying.
I agree.
And of tremendous importance is that part of the world which is attached to neither camp. The uncommitted nations of the world, represented in gray on the map. For the most part, these nations are absorbed with their own problems. Either they are newly independent after years of domination by a foreign power, or they are still seeking independence. A strong tide of nationalism sweeps over this part of the world, and with it, a mistrust of anything they feel is associated with the old ways of colonialism. They are not committed to either side in the conflict. Our own policy toward them has been one strictly of watchful, non-intrusive friendship, giving help when help is asked for, but otherwise keeping hands off their internal affairs. The communists have been more direct. Their local party members have not hesitated to exploit to their own advantage the passions that smolder in these new states, and to identify themselves in the minds of the people there, whenever possible, with anti-colonialism, and us with its opposite. It is part of their worldwide technique. How do our military services adapt themselves to this conflict, in which perhaps no gun may be fired? By recognizing that the activities and performances of all their members in every foreign country in which they are stationed will either add to or detract from the goodwill our nation needs in this contest for the respect of the peoples of the world. The President of the United States has called developments of good relationships between United States citizens abroad and members of their host countries basic to the full attainment of our foreign policy objectives. And the services have responded by promoting such good relationships as part of their overall policy. The communists initiated the Cold War for the same reason they would have started a hot war had that been feasible, or would now, should they ever decide that the free world was weak enough for them to risk it. Whatever the degree of tension they create, it is a substitute for hot war, another means of achieving their end. And their end, of course, is world conquest, short of war if possible.
World conquest by actions short of war. Actions that are political, economic, and ideological. How do the communists apply these three methods? First, we will consider the political method and the techniques the communists use when they attempt to acquire their objectives in this way. we would do well to consider the success the communists have had by using the political method alone. As you will see from the black area on this map, they have expanded between 1940 and 1954, took over 15 countries, totaling 714 million people.
When this was made in 1961, I want to say. I'm almost positive.
Since 1954, there have been major internal disruptions in 9 additional countries outside the Iron Curtain. Now, how do they go about applying this political method? The communist coup in Czechoslovakia in 1948 provides us with a blueprint of the ideal formula for political conquest, which includes taking over a country without outside intervention. Destruction of its parliamentary form of government. Murder of its democratic leaders when necessary. Rigged elections with only the communist candidates on the ballot. Once the penetration is complete, all this is backed by the naked force of military occupation. By such devices, the Soviet Union turned its neighboring states into satellites, political and economic puppets. In China, political action was cruder, but no less effective. Here, it was political action by conquest. And so overwhelming has this political conquest been that the communists have been able to propel Red China to a position of major influence in the Eastern world. The political force method includes the suppression of freedom in a country already under communist control, without outside interference. Inside the Iron Curtain, there were revolutions without help from the outside. In East Germany in 1953, Poland in 1956, Hungary in the same year, and Tibet in 1959, all of them brutally suppressed. And finally, there is the International Communist Party, dedicated to the subversion and overthrow of every still free government. Where the political method may not prevail, there is always the economic method.
I'm Frank McGee. Let's consider for a moment this matter of the communist use of economic methods to achieve conquest and how it's done. The present masters of the Soviet Union have said to us, peaceful coexistence until we bury you. They propose to officiate at our interment by catching up with us industrially and then surpassing us. They're working hard at it. Today, the 200 million inhabitants of the Soviet state bend their backs and their talents to the Kremlin's will. And Sputnik and Sputnik's successors have proved conclusively enough the USSR's proficiency in the area of technical ability. Throughout the vast stretches of this empire, you find new industrial cities, plants, assembly lines, the most modern equipment. Soviet products of every description awaiting delivery and reaching industrially backward areas of the non-communist world. Teams of Russian technicians are available to operate this machinery. This is economic penetration, paving the way for political takeover. The hand of Soviet friendship, which usually precedes an attempt at economic penetration, has been reaching into every part of the world which shows the slightest inclination to receive it. Recently, we've seen it extend into our own hemisphere, into turbulent Cuba, where it was embraced as a triumph of Soviet policy. A few statistics will demonstrate how serious this threat is becoming to the free world. Of the entire annual Soviet economic capability, their gross national product, 70%, or it may run as high as 80%, is devoted to the area of heavy industry. The U.S. and free world share of gross national product devoted to the same area is certainly not much more than 20%. In terms of volume applied to this area of gross national product, the Soviet Union is beginning to surge ahead.
Finally, The communists attempt ideological penetration. Perhaps their strongest efforts go into this kind of penetration into the free world. Before we talk about ideological penetration itself, let's take a look at the reasons why this form of penetration is so important to the communists. For one thing, communist aggression has alarmed many free nations and produced their united will to resist. These nations have implemented their will to resist all other forms of Soviet penetration through a number of trade agreements. The United States and other industrially strong nations of the free world are actively promoting better living conditions all over the world. This has the effect not only of helping these countries to improve their industrial and economic position, but also of providing a defense against communist intrigue, which flourishes in depressed economic areas. The military potential of the free world has been revived by such mutual defense pacts as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in Europe, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization to counter aggression in this part of the world, the ANZUS Treaty, and the Rio Treaty to provide hemisphere defense. All over the world, our allies are now setting up their own defense bases with the technical know-how to operate them. This kind of military help by us is not by any means a one-sided operation. The nations involved contribute as heavily as they can. No less valuable are the morale and friendly relations being generated between servicemen of all the participating countries in joint training programs, demonstrating their respective skills to each other. They crossed the language barrier to comradeship. This banding together by nations with a common purpose has produced strength not only in the military and economic field, but in the moral, spiritual values as well. At a meeting of the NATO Atlantic Congress in 1959, a statement was adopted which called attention to the moral unity binding the member nations. This document recognizes respect for human dignity as the inalienable basis of civilization. Among the fundamental rights of man specifically named are respect for the sanctity of human life, the right to freedom of speech, of conscience and religion, of opinion and belief, the right of every man to work and to receive his just reward, the right of the family to stability, and the right of parents over their children and their education. In all these ways, economically, militarily, morally, the world outside the communist orbit slowly draws itself together. The practical communists appraise this consolidation of free world defenses. It confronts them with a serious deterrence to their world ambitions.
What was that?
I said just shake that baby.
Hence, they must destroy Allied unity, or at least weaken it. How? Well, here we return to the subject of ideological penetration. For if all other forms of penetration don't work, if the united strength of the non-communist world makes political penetration unfeasible and economic penetration unsuccessful...
Well, I'll be damned if I'll be penetrated by a communist. Just saying.
They do love that word, don't they?
Yeah.
Penetrated here.
If cultural penetration does not do the job...
Yeah, it's a psychological thing. I think it's to, to feel that we're like being invaded, that we're being exploited and taken advantage of, raped, literally.
Communists can always hope to succeed by resorting to ideological warfare against their strongest opponent, meaning us. Americans go home. Wall Street warmongers, down with American imperialism. Peace. Yes, peace, their propaganda screams. On communist terms, naturally. Inside the free world, communists and their sympathizers seek to foment suspicion and distrust of our motives, even attempt to influence our allies to eliminate our overseas bases, which are protecting them as well as us. Their mediums of mass communication are tireless in vilifying us as a nation and as individuals, such as depicting you as a brute and a ravager. Is there a chance that the communists will succeed? Is there a possibility that our allies will accept this malicious perversion of us and everything we stand for? In large part, that is going to depend on how thoroughly we understand this conflict and how dedicated we are to victory. Understanding is a continuing process, and it embraces many different aspects of our day-to-day living. It is, at root, a function which involves the flow of information.
I am Lowell Thomas. We live amid the greatest abundance of information any people has ever had. But survey after survey reveals an astonishingly low informational level among us. To be sure, the right to remain uninformed is one of the privileges of a democracy, but in a contest such as the one we are engaged in, it is one of the surest ways of losing our freedom. Being informed does not mean only keeping up to date on current events, important though that is. It means also being aware of developments within our own nation and the forces that move through it, its weaknesses as well as its strengths. We all too often dishonor our freedom and demean it. But that's not the full story. If it were, our system would have collapsed long before this. The full story is in the progress we consistently make through law and through education, the way free men must. The communists would like to have you, as well as people in every country in the world, believe otherwise. And once they have succeeded in letting the idea take root that our deficiencies are our chief characteristics, once they have managed to erode our faith in ourselves at least a little, that much of the battle is lost.
A snake of a whisper is abroad that Americans have lost touch with their past. Is it true? It can't be, if we are to survive and win. If we understand the conflict, then we understand the need to keep America strong in our greatest challenge by keeping alive the standards and the traditions which have been her glory. What are the bulwarks of our past upon which our society has been built? There are many, and we have discussed some of them. Our spiritual heritage, our belief in individual liberty. But there is yet another, as important as any of these.
And that's it.
It was good.
Yeah. Let's see what the chat had to say. Moonbase Radio says, Addy. Okay, so Sir Adamantine, greetings. Boom Skep Talk is, that's me playing the banjo and singing, NBR. Okay.
He's got a video out.
Oh. Interesting. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and pop in the foyer here and give everybody a little slideshow. How about that? And something to go behind us as we talk. So, so tomorrow we get to choose. It's like watching those things. It just keeps reinforcing the importance of having, the need to vote in this damn election. Communism is bad, okay? Because I don't know, man. It's they're making a move, and I really do believe that the Communist Party has a huge hand in all this shit that's been going on this year. Not only the fact that they released the contagion, but et cetera, et cetera.
They definitely do.
Yeah.
Like you pointed out that they're funding the riots going on.
Mm-hmm.
Pallets of bricks everywhere.
Yeah.
And their little tent cities that keep popping up to house these people. Then you have the 3 stripes in Biden's name.
That's right.
Had to look that one up. You keep pointing all this stuff out to me, and I'm like, no way. Okay, now this is where Irate has finally gone off the ledge.
Exactly.
I'm not going to believe what he's telling me. And then I look it up, and I'm like, son of a bitch, he did it again.
Yeah. The 3 stripes and the E in the Biden logo for his election. You know, his campaign logo is what's known as the three banners of the Chinese Communist Party. They represent the three eras that they have gone through. And I'm sure that Xi will initiate a fourth banner at some point, but for his era.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's they have to mark their dynasties, man. They can't help it.
The egos.
See, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But more and more stuff is standing out. So, or I'll do a stream and then I'll go vote. I don't care if I stand in line all night. I made arrangements for my children, so that way I can stay all day outside if need be.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you think it's going to be that bad?
If I don't know, there's this interactive map that I think the Washington Examiner, maybe the Washington Post, had in an article, and they're showing that 91% of registered voters in Texas have already voted.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know. That's a lot for early voting. It's the biggest turnout in the history of our state, I think. So I'm hoping everyone in my town has already voted, and I'm just going to be the lame person showing up on election day to go vote.
The old cow's tail showing up. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, shit. This is the point where it's time to scoot, I guess. Do you want to like shill your selfish self?
Yeah, I got to stream tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Central. I don't know what we're going to talk about, seeing as how it's election day. I'm kind of watching the news, see if any outrageous shit comes out tonight. So
right.
It should be fun.
If you're going to drop a nuke, man, it needs to be down. Now,
yeah.
It's now or nothing. So it'll be interesting. Right. Next thing I'm doing is the cream stream on Friday night. I got to go over I got some, IRL shit to do. And then next Sunday it'll be right-wing BDSM guy. And next week we'll be close to finishing this thing out, the Spectre of Communism. But I don't know. I'm really digging this deal. I'm having fun. It's really weird, man. People call me paranoid my whole life, and it's like, but what if I'm right? Anyway, right? And on that fact, let's just say goodbye, and we'll be out.
Good night.
Take care, fanbots. We'll see you on the flip-flop.